No, I haven't found Godot. I like to think I know something about him now, though. Well, let's see. I'd been in about 10 different schools before the 8th grade, including a reform school, 2 orphanages, and I dropped out of school around the 10th grade and got married, joined the Army, spent 2 years, got a divorce, fathered 2 children, and by the time I was 21, I found myself riding a bus to San Quentin prison, sentenced for life without possibility of parole. 9 years at San Quentin, I worked for the Catholic chaplain. And I saw close up people on death row, many other inmates who came well after I'd gone into the prison who had serious crimes. And I began thinking about the priesthood, and I began thinking seriously about counseling, and got really involved in helping people, and was involved in the theater and wrote a play, as you said, The Cage, and I feel that I began to know something more about my life and could feel more philosophically, at any rate, about my fellow man. And so redemption is a slow process. I'm qualified to talk about my art, and it happens to be, at one point in my background, I committed a crime and served a lot of time for that offense, neither of which I would minimize before you or anyone else. So I prefer to talk about my art, but I'm not ashamed of what happened to me, and if it would help anyone else, I think that's the main idea. If I can help someone else stay out of prison, if by seeing The Cage, people would have second thoughts about what it would really be like inside. And after all, that was an effort that we mounted, and I say we because the San Quentin Drama Workshop are a group of people who have in mind the social utility of theater. When in the 60s we were campaigning for rehabilitation and recognition of a system which needed changing vis-a-vis the prison system, that there was money being spent on rehabilitation, there was hope for the human spirit, and that we could redirect people's lives, and that there was something worth saving. Now we find that the emphasis is on the imperative to punish, and we're building more prisons, not more programs in the community to stop people from going to prison. So I would say that we've lost this hope of rehabilitation today, and we've just simply given up on it, and we've decided in the interim, barring a better system, that will build prisons and that will punish people when they commit crimes. I think that that's self-defeating in many ways, as would be taking someone's life in capital punishment. We learn nothing from that, and violence begets violence. I think that Waiting for Godot triggered in me something that had perhaps been quite latent, some recessed part of me which could emerge on a stage, give me that stage, you know, give me that chance. Well, for the last 10 years, I've been doing his work all over, Far East, Australia, Europe, and
sometimes under his direction.
All of the time now. He has directed principally the circle of his work, which have had interest in over the years. It's called the San Quentin cycle of his work, because 7 of those productions were given in the small circle of his plays in a 3-year period there. Waiting for Godot, Endgame, and Krapp's Last Tape. And you know, you could only dream of what they really were about, because everyone has an interpretation of a classic play. It's like doing Shakespeare. There'll be 15 versions of it before you can blink an eye. And so it came to pass that I found myself in Europe and face to face with Sam Beckett. We had brought a production of Endgame in his honor to the American Cultural Center in Paris. And this was 1974. And he didn't come to see it because he rarely attends the theater. but he sent his spies. And in this case, his niece, Emmanuelle, and Barbara Bray, who's a translator and a friend of Sam's. And they came backstage after the performance, which was completely outsold, and said how much they enjoyed it and that they would report to Sam. So the next day, as we're packing up the scenery, the phone rings, and it's Sam Beckett. And he says, I'd like to meet you for coffee. And of course, I had just been corresponding with him. I hadn't face-to-face with him yet. And so we met, and he said, by chance, I'm going to Berlin to direct Waiting for Godot for the first time. And if you're around, I'd like to invite you to attend a rehearsal or two. So my chance came because I was invited to Berlin to direct a play for a German company. So it came to pass that I not only got a chance to work with him, but spend time with him. And I was conducting some workshops for a while at Tegel Prison in Berlin, and I got him to come inside with me. And so that was a wonderful experience, although my German isn't quite that good, but I was able to follow a lot. And Beckett speaks marvelous German. And so anyway, it came to pass that a year later, I was invited to spend a year in Berlin on a grant, the Deutsche Akademische Austauschdienstgrant, which is sort of the German exchange program. And while there, my project was Kraft's Last Tape. And I wrote to Beckett and I said, I'm going to do the play. Could you give me any hints? And he said, well, you know, I'm going to be in Stuttgart directing some small television plays. And so I went to Stuttgart, talked to him a bit, and he said, I asked him, I said, would you direct me in the play, Sam? And he said yes. And it turns out that Beckett's view of his own work is, I mean, nobody could do it but Sam Beckett, the way Sam Beckett sees it. It's a special music. Everything is, it's perfect choreography. He conducts his plays. He doesn't direct them. All of his movement is what he calls corporeal punctuation. So that the body has to go through these marvelous changes to make a point. And he doesn't let you move and give a line at the same time. You either have to do one or the other, not together. The voice, the use of the voice. He has this marvelous Irish lilt in his own voice, and if you're around him for more than 15 minutes, you can't help but hear that voice over and over and over again. He lives above La Sancté prison in Paris. He's created some of the most seminal plays in modern drama from the point of view of looking down into a French prison yard, where he told me in the 30s they used to guillotine people. I think that Samuel Beckett is a humanist, and he's certainly one of the great people of the 20th century. He's the guy who's made the biggest impact on my life. Certainly, those of us who try to write for the theater have been greatly aided in this effort by the work of Samuel Beckett, because, you know, he's the form smasher. He showed us all how to do it. And there's a poignant little story about a writer now dead, William Saroyan, who, when Beckett's play appeared on Broadway, or at least appeared in New York in the mid-50s, when it opened over here, Alan Schneider's production.
Yes.
And Saroyan came out of the performance crying. And as one of our major dramatists of that era, people said, well, Bill, why are you crying? And he said, because, he said, this man Beckett, he said, after seeing Waiting for Godot, he said, he's made it easier for all of us to work in the theater. And quite true. I mean, I think Pinter, Albee, any number of writers, Mamet today would say, you know, thanks, Sam Beckett.
Yes.